I smoothed the wrinkles in my blouse and adjusted the cuff of my watch, a tiny nervous ritual I'd carried since college. The morning sunlight spilled across my desk, hitting the silver frame holding a photo of my grandmother, the woman who had always told me that resilience was the quietest kind of power. My phone buzzed on the marble surface, vibrating against the polished wood. I picked it up, eyes narrowing as the notification scrolled across the screen. Samantha, see you at the office at 9. That little smirk I'd memorized from the last conversation with my boss flashed in my mind, the one that ended with him saying, "Congratulations, you're fired." I had handed over the laptop calmly, just as I had promised myself I would. No tears, no begging, just the measured click of the hinge and a deep, steadying breath. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I had walked out that day thinking it was the end, but sitting here in my apartment, overlooking the skyline, I knew it had only been the beginning. The city hummed below, oblivious to my private reckoning. I could feel the silk of my blouse against my skin, the weight of anticipation like a pulse in my veins, and the faint smell of coffee that promised clarity. Some part of me wanted to laugh at how predictable life could be. The fire had felt like an end, but maybe, just maybe, it had been the exact spark I needed. I remember the sting of that summer afternoon like it was yesterday. I was 24, fresh out of college, eager and naive, standing in my tiny, cluttered apartment with nothing but a box of my things and a heart full of hope. My parents had barely looked at me, their faces tight with disappointment, the words sharp as knives. "You're not ready for this, Sam," my father said, shaking his head. "Maybe you should just let someone else handle it." I bit back the lump in my throat, my hands trembling around the edge of the kitchen counter. My mother, arms crossed, glanced at me like I was a problem to be managed rather than a daughter to be loved. The dismissal was so casual it nearly broke me, as if my dreams were a burden, my ambition a flaw. That night, I sat on the worn armchair my grandmother had given me years before, the velvet fraying at the edges. I traced the intricate pattern with my fingertips and remembered her words. "Samantha, when the world tells you you can't, that's exactly when you must. Guard your heart, but never shrink from your fire." The advice felt like a lifeline. I clutched the chair's armrest, my resolve hardening. I had nowhere else to turn but forward. I applied for every small opportunity, every freelance project I could find, learning to stretch every dollar, every skill, every ounce of determination. It wasn't glamorous. Nights spent coding alone under the hum of a desk lamp, phone calls that ended in polite rejection, temp jobs that made me question if I had chosen the right path. But each no strengthened a quiet certainty. I would not let someone else define my worth. I remember standing on the balcony of that apartment, looking at the city lights, feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The fear of failing was real, but the thought of never trying was unbearable. My grandmother's words echoed in the night air, a mantra I whispered to myself. Guard your heart, but never shrink from your fire. And so I decided, right then, with nothing but determination and a single, fragile sense of hope, that I would rise on my own terms, that no one would ever dismiss me again. I didn't just survive. I built, brick by brick, a life that was mine alone. The first freelance contract came unexpectedly, a small project that barely paid the bills, but it felt like a victory. I remember sitting at my tiny desk, laptop humming, the hum of the city below filtering through my apartment window, and realizing, this is the start. It wasn't easy. Nights blurred into mornings as I juggled learning new skills, perfecting pitches, and fighting the creeping self-doubt that whispered I wasn't enough. I often glanced at my grandmother's old advice on the corner of my corkboard, her words scrawled in neat handwriting. Guard your heart, but never shrink from your fire. They were a compass through the uncertainty. Then I met Olivia Mercer, a seasoned strategist with a sharp mind and a softer heart. She saw something in me I didn't yet recognize, potential wrapped in stubbornness and raw ambition. "Samantha, you're doing good work," she told me one evening after a long call, "but don't let them see the half measures. You deserve the whole stage." Her mentorship was like oxygen, lifting me through the suffocating doubts I carried. The first major client was a turning point. I still remember the call, a large account, a tight deadline, and every ounce of skill I had amassed. I poured myself into it, refining every detail, anticipating every need. When they signed the contract, the thrill was almost intoxicating. I had created value in a world that had tried to tell me I wasn't ready. Yet I didn't broadcast any of it. Family gatherings were politely skipped, social media updates carefully curated, progress tucked away in spreadsheets, and quiet reflections. Even my closest friends saw only glimpses, a vague promotion here, a modest celebration there. There was a strange pleasure in keeping my success hidden, a secret garden that belonged only to me. There were setbacks, of course. A client pulled out unexpectedly. A software glitch wiped a week's work, and nights of isolation felt like a heavy fog pressing on my chest. But with each challenge, my resolve hardened. I learned to adapt, to pivot, to anticipate the unexpected. Small wins began stacking into larger achievements. First profitable sale, first recognition in industry newsletters, first whispers of my growing reputation. And all the while, I kept a mental ledger of my independence, a quiet pride swelling in my chest. I was no longer the girl trembling in her parents' kitchen, desperate for approval. I was someone who could walk into any room with confidence, who had crafted her own path, and whose fire was entirely her own. Sitting at my sleek, organized desk now, the city lights twinkling below, I allowed myself a small smile. The fire my grandmother had nurtured burned brighter than ever, and no one, not even my old boss with his smirk, could extinguish it. The knock on my office door was hesitant, almost cautious. I looked up from my laptop, letting the silence stretch for a moment longer than necessary. There they were, my parents, faces a mixture of curiosity, guilt, and expectation, as if they were bracing themselves to find me still struggling, still the same girl they'd dismissed years ago. "Sam, we thought we'd stop by," my father said, voice tight. "We just wanted to see how things are going." I gestured toward the space, a soft smile curving my lips. "Of course. Come in." The room was immaculate but lived in, a reflection of the woman I'd become. Expensive artwork lined the walls, each piece a subtle celebration of my taste and independence. The desk was minimalistic yet powerful, with a sleek laptop, a curated collection of books, and a single vase of fresh flowers, a nod to the attention I paid to small details. They took it all in, their eyes flitting from the abstract painting on the far wall to the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I allowed the pause to stretch, savoring the tension. The realization that the woman before them was not the one they had expected began to dawn on their faces. I leaned back in my chair, letting my hands rest lightly on the armrests. "I wanted to show you this before I said anything," I began. "This company you see me managing? I started it myself. The contracts, the clients, the projects, all of it was built from the ground up, without anyone else's permission or approval." My mother's lips parted slightly, shock flickering in her eyes. My father's jaw tightened, a quiet struggle between disbelief and pride. You built all this?" he asked, voice almost unsteady. I nodded, letting a small, controlled smile appear. "And it doesn't stop here. I own 60% of the company. I'm responsible for every major account, and yes, I've made enough in the last 3 years to be completely independent. I didn't just survive your doubt. I thrived despite it." Their reactions were almost cinematic in their rawness. My mother's hands trembled as she clasped them together. My father's eyes softened, guilt mingling with amazement. "Sam, we didn't realize," my mother whispered. I let them absorb it, the silence stretching like a taut wire. Every smirk, every dismissive word they had ever thrown at me replayed in my mind, but now it belonged to the past. This was my moment, my reveal, and they could not take it away. Then I added, softer this time, yet firm, "I didn't tell you before because I had to build it first. Not for you, not for anyone else, for me. And now that it's done, you're here. I hope you can be proud, not just of what I've achieved, but of what I've become. Someone who stands on her own, unshaken, unstoppable. Their eyes glistened, a mix of remorse and awe. I could see them grappling with the truth, realizing the girl they once underestimated had quietly become a force they could not ignore. And in that silence, in the weight of their astonishment, I felt a quiet, powerful satisfaction. The woman who had been fired, dismissed, and doubted had risen. The world, and they, were finally seeing her for who she truly was. I watched my parents' faces closely, noticing the subtle shifts, the relief in their shoulders, the shame in their eyes, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But I knew that admiration alone wouldn't rewrite old patterns. I had to set the rules. "I'll help," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "But on my terms. Things can't go back to the way they were. We all need to grow." My father blinked, startled. "Your terms?" "Yes," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I will guide you, support you, and yes, maybe even invest in a few projects you've wanted to pursue. But only if you commit to certain changes." I outlined them carefully, each one precise, grounded in accountability. No more dismissing others' ambitions. You must encourage rather than belittle. Support without judgment. Pursue your own goals with integrity. Don't lean on me to solve everything. Build your own paths, make mistakes, and own them. Let go of toxic habits. Guilt, shame, and old grudges have no place here. We either move forward or we stay behind. Honor your word. If you say you'll do something, follow through. No excuses. My mother's eyes softened, tears brimming. I can do that. I want to do that." I nodded. "Good. Then let's start small. We'll meet weekly. You'll give updates and I'll guide where needed. But know this, I'm not here to rescue anyone. I'm here to help people show up as the best version of themselves." For the first time in years, the dynamic had shifted. The girl who had once crumpled under their disapproval was now the one steering the ship. It was a subtle power, not rooted in anger or revenge, but in clarity and confidence. "I've spent years building my life quietly," I continued, my voice softening, carrying both warmth and authority. "I want my family in it, yes, but they must respect the journey. I will not allow the past to dictate our future." They nodded, tentative but receptive. My father's hand brushed mine lightly, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson he had learned too late. Respect is earned, and it is reciprocal. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of serenity. Power had shifted, but it wasn't about domination. It was about creating space for everyone to grow while I remained anchored in my truth. The air between us was lighter, charged with possibility rather than resentment. And as I leaned back in my chair, the skyline stretching before me, I realized something profound. I wasn't just successful. I was in control of my world, and I could extend my hand to others, but only if they were willing to rise with me, not beneath me. This wasn't just victory. It was transformation, mine, and potentially theirs too, if they were brave enough to follow through. Weeks passed, and I watched the subtle shifts in my family with a quiet satisfaction. My parents, tentative at first, began taking real steps toward change. My father started volunteering his skills at a local nonprofit, finally channeling his energy into something meaningful rather than controlling. My mother pursued the art classes she'd always dreamed of, filling her home with color and laughter. It wasn't perfect. Old habits lingered like shadows, but progress was unmistakable. I, too, had changed in ways I hadn't anticipated. Standing in my office, surrounded by the life I had meticulously built, I felt the weight of the journey lift slightly. I thought of the worn armchair in my first apartment, the velvet fraying beneath my fingers, and my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Guard your heart, but never shrink from your fire. That fire had carried me through rejection, betrayal, and self-doubt. Now it was tempered with wisdom and grace. I allowed myself a moment to reflect on the path I'd walked. I had been fired, underestimated, and dismissed, yet each blow had become a stepping stone. Each setback had taught resilience. Each dismissal had fueled determination. The success I had built wasn't just measured in clients, revenue, or recognition. It was measured in the woman I had become, steadfast, discerning, and unshakably self-respecting. As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow across my office, I took a deep breath, feeling the gentle pulse of achievement and clarity. My story wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about owning my life, my choices, and my worth. And the best part? I had done it on my terms, quietly but powerfully, letting the world and my doubters catch up to me in their own time. I glanced at the silver-framed photo of my grandmother again, her smile reassuring, timeless. I whispered a small, private thanks for the wisdom she had entrusted me. It had been my guide, my anchor, and my spark. And as I stood, looking out over the city lights, I felt a profound sense of closure and anticipation. I had survived, I had conquered, and I had grown. They thought my story ended when they fired me, but it had only just begun.